This is the Vought F4U-Corsair. The Vought F4U-Corsair is a carrier-based fighter/bomber used in World War II and in the Korean War by America. May 29th of 1940, its first flight was made, and in December 28th of 1942, it was finally introduced into the United States Air Force. As I said earlier in the video, I said carrier-based. This means that this plane is going to work on aircraft carriers. You know, the big ships with the very long decks packed with planes. These planes would fly off of them, allowing planes to not have to be on the ground, but instead to be able to fly from the middle of the ocean. Well, these were meant to do that. Although the F4U-Corsair was meant to do that, it really didn't end up happening. It was made to do it, but there were problems with the landing. It would fly smoothly, sure, but when it went to land on the carrier decks, it tended to have a bit of a bounce. When the plane would hit the deck, it would bounce up and down, causing a little hook, which would usually be on the tail of it here, around the wheel. See, there would usually be a little hook that would connect to the deck of the aircraft carrier because, you know, on land, you have a very, very long airfield where you have as much time as you need to take off, gather speed, and get into the air. That's not the case on a much shorter aircraft carrier. So that hook would kind of catch the plane and slow it down much faster than the plane could slow down on an airfield. Although the plane couldn't be used on naval aircraft carriers, they were used by the Marines. The Marines operated the Vought F4U-Corsair from bases in Guadalcanal and throughout the Solomon Islands against the Japanese. The Japanese considered the F4U-Corsair to be a very formidable foe, and had a kill ratio of 11-1, meaning for every one Vought F4U-Corsair, about 11 Japanese fighters were shot down. During the second half of World War II, the problems with the plane were finally fixed, and it was allowed to land on aircraft carriers pretty much unscathed. But by then, more formidable or better planes were already made, and well, it wasn't needed for carrier-based combat anymore. The aircraft that replaced the F4U-Corsair was the F4F Wildcat. The losses for this plane during World War II in air combat was about 189. From anti-aircraft guns on ground and on ships, about 349 were destroyed. And the amount destroyed on the ground, whether that be from Japanese bombings to mechanical failure, about 164 were destroyed. Sure, the numbers are in the hundreds and it sounds like a lot, but compared to the fact that one of these equated to 11 Japanese planes and about, 12,571 of these planes were made, I think it won over the Japanese for a good bit. In the Korean War, these planes were mainly used for ground attack missions, whether that mean bombs being attached to the bottom of this or rockets being fired from it. They were used to attack supply lines, artillery, tanks, all these things. With 12,000 built, the plane finally retired in 1943 in the U.S. and in 1979 in Honduras. Now, another very interesting thing about this plane is that it was nicknamed the Whistling Death by the Japanese. It's a very cool sounding name. That's because, as you can see on the model here in the back of the plane, you can see it's kind of squares. Well, on a real plane, that would be where the oil coolers and some other mechanisms of the plane would be. Now, you see, it's kind of like that because on a real plane, these would be kind of holes in the back of it, where air would rush through and make a whistling sort of noise. So when the Japanese pilots or Japanese crewmen heard this, and, well, the plane was destroying a lot of Japanese planes, they called it the Whistling Death. That's just a little bit of the history behind the F4U-Corsair. Now, I know on the base of this it says Scout 4, and I don't know why, to be honest. I got this at a pawn shop, so I couldn't explain that to you. But it is indeed called the Vought F4U-Corsair. Thank you for watching, and have a nice night. or day, or morning. It's night for me right now. But anyway, goodbye.